My name is Adela Wilson, and I'm 21 years old. For 18 years, I lived as the invisible twin, breathing the same air as my sister Sophia, but never receiving the same warmth from our parents. 3 years ago, on our 18th birthday, I finally broke free, walking away with nothing but a backpack and $300. Yesterday, my phone lit up with my mother's number for the first time since I left. They want to meet to start over. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. I come from what looked like the perfect family on paper. My parents, James and Margaret Wilson, were respected professionals in our community. Dad worked as an accountant for a large firm downtown, and Mom was a high school math teacher. Then there were US twins, me and my sister Sophia, born just 7 minutes apart. Sophia came first, and sometimes I wonder if those 7 minutes gave her a head start in winning our parents' affection too. When we were very young, around 3 or 4, I don't remember noticing any difference in how our parents treated us. We shared everything: clothes, toys, and attention. Some of my earliest memories are actually quite happy. I remember the 4 of us going to the park on Sundays, getting ice cream afterward, and Mom and Dad taking turns pushing us on the swings. But things began to change around the time we started kindergarten. It was subtle at first, so subtle that for years I wondered if I was imagining it. Sophia was naturally more outgoing, while I was quieter, more observant. When we'd come home from school, Sophia would burst through the door with animated stories about her day, and our parents would gather around laughing at her jokes and praising her social skills. When it was my turn to share, I'd notice their eyes wander to the clock or their phones. They'd nod and say, "That's nice, honey," without really listening. By first grade, the pattern was becoming clearer. If Sophia brought home a B on a test, there would be celebratory ice cream. If I brought home an A, it was expected. "Of course you did well," my mother would say. "You always have your nose in a book." Not a compliment, but a subtle criticism of what she saw as my antisocial tendencies. There was this talent show in 3rd grade that really stands out in my memory. Sophia wanted to perform a dance routine. Our parents immediately signed her up for dance lessons twice a week for 2 months leading up to the show. They bought her a beautiful costume and spent hours helping her practice. I wanted to play the piano for my talent. We had an old upright piano that had belonged to my grandmother, and I'd been teaching myself to play using a beginner's book. When I asked for lessons like Sophia was getting for dance, my father said, "Piano lessons are expensive, Adela. Why don't you try something simpler?" So I practiced on my own every day after school while Sophia was at her dance lessons. I worked on a simplified version of Beethoven's For Elise until my fingers ached. The night of the talent show, Sophia performed her dance and forgot several steps, but she smiled through it and added some improvised twirls at the end. The audience applauded and my parents beamed with pride. When it was my turn, I played my piece without a single mistake. Several parents came up afterward to ask if I was taking lessons, somewhere surprised when I said I'd taught myself. But my own parents barely mentioned my performance on the drive home. They talked about how adorable Sophia looked in her costume, and how brave she was for continuing when she forgot the steps. "That's what real performers do," my dad said, reaching back to squeeze Sophia's knee. "They don't give up when things get tough." I sat next to Sophia in silence, wondering what I'd done wrong. I hadn't made any mistakes to overcome. I'd practiced until I got it right, but somehow that was worth less than Sophia's charming recovery from her errors. As we got older, I threw myself into academics, thinking maybe that could be my way to earn their approval. I joined the math club, the debate team, and the school newspaper. I stayed up late studying, pushing myself to excel in everything. Sophia remained popular and social, maintaining decent but not exceptional grades. Yet at parent-teacher conferences, my achievements were mentioned with a quick nod, while Sophia's teachers' comments about her wonderful personality and leadership potential were repeated at family dinners for weeks. Our family dynamics were most obvious at those dinner tables. Each night we'd gather to eat and share our days. Sophia's stories about her friends, her participation in school spirit events, or even mundane details about lunch period drama would captivate our parents. They'd ask follow-up questions, laugh at all the right moments, and seem genuinely invested. When my turn came, I'd mention winning a debate competition or getting the highest score on an English essay, and I'd watch their eyes glaze over. "That's nice, honey," my mother would say, before turning the conversation back to Sophia or their own days. After a while, I stopped sharing altogether. Why bother when no one was really listening? The one person who saw me, truly saw me, was my grandmother, my father's mother. Grandma Jean lived about an hour away, but she would visit at least once a month. While everyone else orbited around Sophia like she was the sun, Grandma would seek me out. She'd find me reading in my room or practicing piano, and she'd sit with me asking thoughtful questions about my interests and actually listening to the answers. "You remind me so much of myself," she told me once. "Your grandfather was the charmer like your sister, but I was the one who kept everything together behind the scenes. People like us, Adela, we run deeper than others can see." On our 13th birthday, Grandma Jean gave me a beautiful silver locket with an intricate filigree pattern. Inside was a tiny photo of her as a young woman. "You carry my spirit," she whispered as she fastened it around my neck. "Never forget that." Sophia received a gift from Grandma too, a pretty bracelet. But it was clear that my gift was special. For once, I had received something more meaningful than my sister, and I treasured that locket more than anything I owned. Sophia was visibly jealous, complaining to our parents that Grandma Jean played favorites. The irony of that complaint was completely lost on my family. After that birthday, I noticed tension between Grandma and my parents. She would make comments at family gatherings, subtle remarks about how they shouldn't overlook the quiet ones. My parents would change the subject quickly, but I knew Grandma was trying in her way to advocate for me. When I was 16, Grandma Jean passed away after a brief illness. I was devastated, not just because I loved her dearly, but because I'd lost the only person in my family who valued me for who I was. At her funeral, I clutched my locket and felt more alone than ever. The years after Grandma died were the hardest. Without her visits to look forward to, I retreated further into myself. I developed defenses to cope with being overlooked. I became fiercely independent, telling myself I didn't need their approval anyway. I started staying late at school, joining more clubs and activities to avoid coming home. I got a part-time job at the local library, surrounded by books that never judged or ignored me. Home became just a place to sleep and change clothes. My family barely noticed my absence. As long as my grades stayed high and I caused no trouble, they were content to focus their attention on Sophia's social calendar and teenage dramas. I was the good twin, the easy one, the one who took care of herself. And for a while, I almost convinced myself that was a strength rather than a wound. By senior year of high school, I had my future mapped out. I had worked tirelessly to maintain perfect grades while building an impressive resume of extracurricular activities and community service. My goal was to earn enough scholarships to attend college without financial help from my parents. I knew better than to expect it. The college acceptance letters started arriving in spring. I got into several good schools, including State University, which offered me a partial scholarship covering about 60% of tuition and fees. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was substantial. I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would be proud enough of this achievement to help with the remaining costs. A week after my acceptance to State, Sophia got her letter from the same university. Despite her mediocre grades and minimal extracurriculars, she was accepted too. I wasn't surprised. Sophia had always been charismatic in interviews, and I suspected she'd written a compelling personal essay. What did surprise me was my parents' reaction. "Both our girls at State. This is perfect," my mother exclaimed at dinner, reaching over to squeeze Sophia's hand. "You'll be able to help each other." The subtext was clear. I would be helping Sophia, not the other way around. But I forced a smile and nodded. At least I'd have my scholarship to give me some independence. 2 weeks before graduation, and just days before our 18th birthday, my parents called a family meeting. We gathered in the living room after dinner, and Dad looked unusually serious. "Girls, we want to talk to you about college," he began. "We've been saving for your education since you were born. It's not enough for both of you to go full ride, but we've managed to set aside enough to fully cover one of you." My heart sank. I knew what was coming before he said it. "Sophia, we're going to use the college fund to cover your expenses completely." Mom continued, as if this was the most natural decision in the world. With your struggles in academics, we think it's important that you focus entirely on your studies without the stress of a job. I sat there stunned as they turned to me with what they probably thought were encouraging smiles. Adela, with your scholarship and your excellent work ethic, we know you'll manage just fine, Dad said. You've always been more independent, and this way you can continue building those important life skills. Plus, you're good at schoolwork, Mom added as if this was a consolation prize. You'll have no trouble maintaining your grades even with a part-time job. Sophia needs to concentrate without distractions. The room was spinning. Years of unequal treatment of being overlooked and taken for granted crystallized in that moment. This wasn't about what was fair or what we'd earned. This was the same pattern that had defined our entire lives. Sophia's needs always came first, and I was expected to fend for myself. So, let me understand this, I said slowly, finding my voice. I worked harder, got better grades, and earned a scholarship, and my reward is that I get less support than Sophia. My mother frowned. Don't be selfish, Adela. Your sister needs more help than you do. You've always been the stronger one. Stronger or just ignored? I shot back, years of hurt bubbling to the surface. When have my needs ever come first in this family? When have you ever celebrated my achievements the way you celebrate Sophia breathing? That's unfair, my father said, his voice hardening. We've always supported both of you equally. I laughed bitterly. Equally? Do you even hear yourself name one time, just one, when you gave me the same attention you give her? They both started speaking at once, making vague references to things they'd done for me over the years, but nothing specific, nothing meaningful. Sophia sat in silence, examining her fingernails, as if this conversation had nothing to do with her. She didn't advocate for me, didn't offer to split the money, didn't acknowledge the blatant favoritism. Her silence was complicity. You know what? I finally interrupted. Keep your money. I've been taking care of myself for years anyway. Why should college be any different? You're being dramatic, my mother sighed. This is what's best for the family. For the family or for Sophia? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, those have always been the same thing. The rest of us just orbit around her. Adela, you've always been more capable, my father said, his tone softening in what I recognized as his patronizing voice. You're going to be successful no matter what. Your sister needs a leg up. So I'm punished for being capable, for working hard, for not demanding your attention every second of every day. I stood up, shaking with anger and hurt. Do you even realize what you're teaching us? That effort means nothing, that Sophia should always expect to be bailed out. That's enough, my father snapped. You're being selfish and ungrateful. We've given you everything you needed. No, I said quietly. You've given me the bare minimum while giving Sophia everything she wanted. There's a difference. I left the room, then ignored my mother calling after me. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, 18 years of being the less loved child playing through my mind like a sad movie. By morning, I had made my decision. I got up before dawn and packed a backpack with essentials. A few changes of clothes, toiletries, my laptop, phone chargers, and the cash I'd saved from my library job, about $300. I put on my grandmother's locket, the one thing that made me feel valued. I wrote a brief note. Since you've always expected me to make it on my own, that's what I'm going to do. Don't worry about me. You never have before. I left the note on my perfectly made bed, slipped out the front door as the sun was rising, and didn't look back. It was our 18th birthday. I gave myself the gift of freedom. The first few days after leaving home were terrifying. I had a partial scholarship to State University, but nowhere to live until dorms opened in late August, over 2 months away. I had $300 to my name, no job, and no real plan beyond escaping the toxic environment I'd grown up in. The first night I stayed at a cheap motel near the bus station, but quickly realized I couldn't afford to keep paying for rooms if I wanted my money to last. On the second day, I discovered that the university library was open late during summer sessions, and it became my sanctuary. I'd arrive when it opened, pretending to be a summer student, find a quiet corner with my laptop to apply for jobs online, and stay until closing. Then I'd find a 24-hour diner, buy the cheapest item on the menu to justify taking up space, and try to nap in the booth until morning. On my fourth day of this routine, I was at the campus coffee shop counting out change for the cheapest cup of drip coffee when the barista gave me a long look. "You've been here every day this week," she said as she handed me my coffee. Her name tag read Jasmine. "And you've been wearing the same clothes." I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "I'm fine," I mumbled, turning to leave. "My shift ends in 20 minutes, she called after me. "Wait around if you want to talk." I almost didn't. Pride nearly sent me back to my corner in the library. But something in her voice wasn't pity. It was recognition. So I sat at a corner table nursing my coffee until she emerged from behind the counter in street clothes, her dark hair freed from its ponytail. "I'm Jasmine," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "And I've been where you are." That conversation changed everything. Jasmine was 24, a graduate student in social work. She'd left an abusive home at 17 and understood what it meant to be young and alone. When she learned I had a scholarship to start in the fall, she offered her couch until I could find a job and my own place. "Pay it forward someday," was all she said when I tried to thank her. Jasmine's apartment was small, just a one-bedroom that she shared with an enormous orange cat named Pumpkin, but it was clean and safe. For the first time in days, I slept without one eye open. The next morning, refreshed and with a real shower and borrowed clean clothes, I hit the pavement looking for work. It took a week of applications, but I landed a job at a bookstore near campus. The pay wasn't great, but the manager was willing to work around my class schedule in the fall, and I got a discount on books. 2 weeks later, I picked up weekend shifts waitressing at a diner. Between the two jobs, working nearly 70 hours a week, I saved enough to put down a deposit on a tiny studio apartment by mid-July. My studio was barely larger than a closet, just enough room for a twin bed, a desk, and a hot plate in what generously might be called a kitchenette. The bathroom was so small I had to step into the shower to close the door. But it was mine, paid for with money I earned, and for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of pride in what I had accomplished on my own. Working 2 jobs while preparing for college was exhausting. Many nights I fell asleep with my face in a textbook trying to get ahead on readings for fall classes. But there was something freeing about the struggle. Every challenge I overcame was proof that I could make it without my parents' conditional support. When orientation week finally arrived in August, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and right. I changed my major from business, which my parents had always pushed as practical, to literature, my true passion. I'd always loved getting lost in books, finding characters who understood what it felt like to be an outsider. Now I could study what I loved without justifying my choice to anyone. In my American Literature Survey course, I met Professor Diana Williams, a brilliant, no-nonsense woman in her 50s, who terrified most of the class with her razor-sharp critiques, but who saw something in my writing that she deemed promising. She kept me after class one day to discuss my analysis of Sylvia Plath's work. "You understand isolation in a way most 19-year-olds don't," she said, peering at me over her reading glasses. "Where does that come from?" I surprised myself by telling her the truth, about my family, about leaving, about building my life from scratch. I expected judgment or pity, but instead she nodded as if confirming something she'd already suspected. "Literature is built on the backs of the overlooked," she said. "The watchers, the listeners, the ones who notice what others miss. You'll make a fine scholar someday if that's what you want." Professor Williams became more than just an instructor. She recommended books beyond our syllabus, invited me to literary events, and eventually helped me secure a paid internship at a small publishing house at the end of my sophomore year. The part-time position allowed me to cut back on waitressing hours and focus more on my studies. As I built my new life, I developed a circle of friends who valued me for exactly who I was. Jasmine remained my closest friend, but I also connected with classmates in my literature courses and coworkers at the bookstore. We started weekly dinner potlucks where everyone brought whatever they could afford. Sometimes that meant I contributed only a loaf of bread, but no one ever made me feel less for it. The holidays were the hardest. That first Thanksgiving, I couldn't afford to go anywhere, so I volunteered at a local shelter serving meals. By Christmas, Jasmine insisted I join her family celebration, and they welcomed me with warmth that made me both grateful and acutely aware of what I'd never had with my own family. Sophia called a few times those first months. I let the calls go to voicemail, not ready to hear whatever justifications she might offer. Her messages were brief, asking if I was okay, saying our parents were worried. I doubted that very much. After a while, the calls stopped coming, and that was almost a relief. With each passing month, the pain of my family's rejection dulled. I built new traditions, created new memories, and discovered strengths I never knew I had. By the end of my sophomore year, I had made the dean's list 3 semesters running, received a promotion at the publishing house to junior editor assistant, and saved enough to move to a slightly larger apartment with an actual separate bedroom. I was becoming someone new, someone confident, independent, and most surprisingly happy. The invisible twin was finally seen and appreciated, even if it wasn't by the people who should have valued me all along. The call came on a Tuesday morning at the start of my junior year. I was rushing to get ready for an early class gathering notes for a presentation when my phone lit up with my mother's number. I froze, staring at the screen as if it might bite me. In 3 years, neither of my parents had called me directly. Only Sophia had reached out, and those calls had stopped over 2 years ago. My first instinct was to reject the call, to continue the wall of silence I'd built between my old life and my new one. But something, curiosity perhaps, or some remnant of hope I thought I'd extinguished, made me answer. Hello. My voice sounded strange in my ears, too formal for speaking to my own mother. Adela. She sounded older somehow, her voice lacking the authoritative tone I remembered. Is that really you? It's me, I confirmed, sitting down on the edge of my bed. Is something wrong? There was a pause, and I heard what sounded like a shaky breath. Your father had a heart attack last week. My stomach dropped. Despite everything, despite the years of favoritism and the final betrayal that drove me away, he was still my father. Is he okay? Yes, she said quickly. It was mild. A warning, the doctors called it. He's home now on medication, making some lifestyle changes. I waited for her to continue, unsure what to say. The gulf of 3 years of silence seemed impossible to cross with small talk. It scared us, Adela, she finally continued. Both of us. And it made us think about everything. About the mistakes we've made. I remained silent. It was the first time I'd ever heard my mother acknowledge making mistakes. We'd like to see you, she said when I didn't respond. This weekend if you can, just to talk. Sophia will be here too. My defenses immediately went up. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Please, she said, and the desperation in her voice was so unfamiliar it startled me. We just want a chance to talk. That's all we're asking. I have a busy schedule, I said, which was true. Between classes, my internship, and my part-time jobs, I had little free time. Just an hour, she pressed. Dinner on Saturday, here at the house. The thought of walking back into that house, of sitting around the dinner table where I'd felt invisible for so many years, made my chest tight. Not at the house, I said firmly. If I agreed to meet, it would have to be somewhere neutral. A restaurant. She agreed quickly, too quickly, making me wonder just how much they wanted this meeting. We settled on a restaurant halfway between campus and my parents' house, an Italian place I'd never been to. As I hung up, I felt a swirl of emotions I couldn't quite name. Anxiety, curiosity, anger, and something else that might have been hope, though I was afraid to acknowledge it. That afternoon, I met Jasmine for coffee between classes and told her about the call. Are you going to go? She asked, stirring her latte thoughtfully. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to say no to protect myself from whatever new hurt they might cause. But another part is curious, she finished for me. That's natural. But be careful, Adela. People don't usually change fundamentally, even after health scares. You think it's a trap that they'll try to guilt me into coming back somehow? Jasmine shook her head. I don't think it's that calculated. But I do think you should be prepared for them to minimize what happened, to expect you to forgive and forget, without real acknowledgement of how they hurt you. I knew she was probably right. Jasmine had been through her own family reconciliation attempts, and they had ended badly. But our situations were different. My parents hadn't been abusive, just neglectful, preferential. Was that enough reason to shut the door permanently? Later that week, I had office hours with Professor Williams and found myself asking for her perspective. Family reconciliations, she mused, removing her glasses to clean them meticulously with a cloth. They're tricky business. The question isn't whether you should give them a chance. That's entirely your decision. But what boundaries you'll maintain if you do. Boundaries. She nodded, replacing her glasses. What are you willing to accept? What kind of relationship can you have that won't undermine the strong, independent woman you've become? These are the questions to ask yourself before you walk into that restaurant. Her advice stayed with me as I debated what to do. By Friday, I'd made my decision. I called my mother back and confirmed I would meet them for dinner, but added conditions I would arrive and leave on my own. The meeting would last no more than 2 hours, and if at any point I felt uncomfortable, I would leave without explanation. Of course, my mother agreed, sounding relieved that I'd agreed at all. Whatever makes you comfortable, Adela. That night, I stood before my closet agonizing over what to wear. It seemed such a trivial concern, and yet it felt important. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but I also wanted them to see that I was doing well without them. I finally settled on a simple navy dress that was professional but not flashy, paired with the silver locket my grandmother had given me. It would be a reminder both to them and to me of the one person in the family who had truly seen my worth. As I lay in bed that night, sleep eluded me. I rehearsed what I might say, how I would react if they minimized their favoritism or tried to blame me for overreacting. I promised myself I wouldn't cry, wouldn't show weakness, wouldn't let them see how deeply their rejection had wounded me. But beneath the defensiveness, a small childish part of me still hoped for what I'd always wanted: true recognition, genuine remorse, and the feeling just once that I mattered as much as Sophia always had. I arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes early, a habit I'd developed for any situation that made me nervous. Being first gave me time to compose myself, to choose where I'd sit, to prepare for whatever was coming. The hostess showed me to a corner table with a good view of the entrance, and I ordered water with lemon, declining anything stronger, though I was tempted. My parents arrived together exactly on time. They paused at the entrance, scanning the room, and I was struck by how much they had aged in 3 years. My father looked thinner, his once dark hair now significantly grayed at the temples. My mother had added new lines around her eyes and mouth, and her posture seemed less rigid than I remembered. They spotted me and approached, hesitation in their steps. "Adela," my father said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "You look wonderful." I stood to greet them, accepting their awkward attempts at hugs with stiff politeness. We all sat, the silence hanging heavy between us, until the waiter arrived to take drink orders. My parents both ordered wine. I stuck with water. Small talk filled the next few minutes. Comments about the restaurant, the weather, how busy the roads were. I answered their questions about my studies with brief factual responses, volunteering nothing extra. 5 minutes after my parents arrived, Sophia walked in. She looked different too. Her hair was shorter than I'd ever seen it, cut in a stylish bob that framed her face. She wore minimal makeup, not the heavy application I remembered, and simple clothes, nothing like the trendy outfits that had once been her signature. She hesitated before approaching, her eyes meeting mine with what looked like genuine apprehension. "Hi, Adela," she said softly, remaining standing until I nodded at the empty chair beside me. She sat, placing her purse carefully on the floor. "Thank you for coming." More small talk followed, painfully strained. We ordered food, commented on the menu, discussed the restaurant's decor. Nothing of substance was said until the appetizers arrived and my father cleared his throat. "Adela," he began, setting down his fork. "I know small talk isn't why we're here. We wanted to tell you that we're sorry." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "The way we treated you wasn't fair," he went on, glancing at my mother, who nodded encouragement. "We didn't see it then, or maybe we didn't want to see it. But after you left, it became impossible to ignore." "What exactly are you sorry for?" I asked, my voice calmer than I felt. I needed specifics, not vague apologies. My father looked uncomfortable. For making you feel less valued than your sister. For not celebrating your accomplishments the way we should have. For the college fund decision that was the last straw. I didn't feel less valued, I corrected him. I was less valued. There's a difference. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We never meant to hurt you, Adela. We thought we were doing what was best, giving each of you what you needed. What I needed, I said evenly, was the same love, attention, and support you gave Sophia without hesitation. What I needed was parents who saw me instead of looking through me. The waiter approached with our main courses, his expression showing he'd picked up on the tension. We paused our conversation while he served the interruption, almost welcome as I gathered my thoughts. When he left, Sophia spoke up, surprising me. I knew, she said quietly. I always knew you were treated differently, and I never said anything. That makes me just as guilty. I turned to look at her, really look at her for the first time. Why didn't you ever say anything? She looked down at her plate. It was comfortable being the favorite. I didn't want that to change. And later, when I was old enough to really understand how unfair it had been going on so long that I didn't know how to address it without admitting I'd been complicit all along. She looked up, meeting my eyes. I've been in therapy for the past 2 years trying to understand my part in all this. I'm truly sorry, Adela. Her honesty caught me off guard. Of all the scenarios I'd imagined Sophia taking responsibility, hadn't been one of them. After you left, my father continued, we were shocked. We couldn't understand why you'd take such a drastic step. But then we found your note, and at first we were angry. We thought you were being ungrateful and dramatic. My mother reached for his hand. But as weeks went by and you didn't come back, we started to reflect on everything. I began remembering incidents from your childhood. The piano recital you mentioned in your note, the science fair where we left early because Sophia was bored, the countless times we interrupted you or didn't listen fully. I swallowed hard, fighting the lump forming in my throat. I hadn't expected them to remember specific incidents, to have actually reflected on their behavior. Why? I asked simply. Why was it always her and never me? My mother looked pained. I saw myself in you, Adela, the studious one, the serious one. I struggled so much with those traits when I was young, feeling awkward and overlooked. I think I pushed you harder because I wanted you to develop the social skills I lacked. She shook her head. It was wrong, and it was about my issues, not who you were. You were a wonderful child who deserved better. And my father added, I think I favored Sophia because she demanded attention. She was loud about her needs while you were quiet about yours. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, as they say. It wasn't fair, but it was easier to respond to the louder voice. I felt a tear slide down my cheek despite my determination not to cry. I wiped it away quickly. Do you know what it does to a child to feel like an afterthought in her own family? To work twice as hard for half the recognition? To know that no matter what she achieves, it will never be enough to earn the love that should be unconditional. My parents looked stricken, and even Sophia had tears in her eyes. After my heart attack, my father said, his voice rough with emotion. All I could think about was regret, not about work or money or status, but about you, about the relationship we destroyed through years of thoughtlessness, about how we might never get the chance to make it right. We're not asking for forgiveness we haven't earned, my mother added. We just want a chance to try again, to build something new if you're willing. We know we can't erase the past, but maybe we can create a better future. I sat in silence for a moment, absorbing their words. Part of me wanted to believe them, to accept that people could change, that my family could become what I had always needed them to be. Another part remained wary, protective of the independent life I'd built, and the strong person I'd become without them. I need time, I said finally. This isn't something I can decide over one dinner. I've spent 3 years building a life that doesn't include any of you, and I'm not sure if or how you fit into it now. They nodded, accepting this answer without pushing for more. Another change from the parents, I remembered. Whatever you decide, Sophia said softly, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. What you did, leaving, making it on your own, it took incredible courage, more than I've ever had. The meal ended with no dramatic resolution, no tearful group hug, no promises of instant family healing. Instead, we exchanged phone numbers. I had a new one they didn't have, and agreed to give each other space to process the conversation. As we parted outside the restaurant, the awkward goodbyes were tempered with a fragile sense of possibility that hadn't existed before. I walked to my car feeling emotionally drained, but standing taller somehow. For the first time, I had faced my family as an equal, not as the overlooked child desperate for crumbs of attention. Whatever came next would be on my terms, not theirs. The days following the restaurant meeting were a blur of conflicting emotions. I went through the motions of my normal routine, classes, work, study sessions, but my mind constantly returned to the things my parents and Sophia had said. I analyzed every word, every expression, trying to gauge their sincerity, to decide if I could trust this apparent change of heart. Jasmine listened patiently as I processed aloud, offering insights without pushing me in any particular direction. The fact that they acknowledged specific incidents is significant, she pointed out as we walked to campus one morning. People who are just going through the motions of apologizing rarely remember details. They talk in generalities. But people can put on a good show when they want something, I countered. What if this is all because my dad had a health scare and they're taking inventory of their lives? Once that fades, they could easily slip back into old patterns. That's possible, she agreed. But motives are complicated. Maybe the heart attack was a wake-up call they needed. The question is whether you're willing to take the risk of being hurt again to see if this change is real. I wasn't sure. The independent life I'd built felt precious and hard-won. Letting my family back in even cautiously meant making myself vulnerable again to the people who had wounded me most deeply. After a week of indecision, I made an appointment with the University Counseling Center. The counselor, a kind-eyed woman named Dr. Mason, specialized in family dynamics and estrangement. Reconciliation isn't an all-or-nothing proposition, she explained during our session. You can establish boundaries that protect your well-being while still opening the door a crack to see if there's potential for a healthier relationship. What kind of boundaries? I asked. Time boundaries. How often you're willing to see them. Communication boundaries. What topics are off limits initially. Emotional boundaries. Being clear about what behaviors you won't tolerate going forward. Her advice made sense, but I was still turning everything over in my mind when an unexpected text from Sophia arrived. Can we meet for coffee, just the two of us? No pressure. I understand if you're not ready. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small cafe near campus on a rainy Saturday afternoon. Sophia arrived before me, 2 cups already on the table, 1 black coffee the way I'd always taken it, and some frothy concoction for herself. I wasn't sure if you still drink it black, she said hesitantly as I sat down. I can get you something else if you'd prefer. This is fine, I said, surprised she'd remembered something so small about me. Thank you. The first few minutes were as awkward as I expected, but gradually the conversation found its rhythm. Without our parents present, Sophia seemed more forthcoming, less careful with her words. I've been seeing a therapist since about 6 months after you left, she explained, cupping her mug with both hands. At first I told myself it was because I was upset about you leaving, but the truth was deeper than that. I felt guilty, and I was struggling with my own identity outside of being the favorite child. What do you mean? She sighed. Being the favorite came with its own pressures. I always felt I had to be the bubbly social one, the one who brought energy into every room. It wasn't always authentic, but it was what earned me attention and praise. She paused. After you left, Mom and Dad started fighting a lot. About you, about how they'd handled everything. Dad would accuse Mom of being too hard on you. Mom would say Dad had spoiled me. For the first time, I was witnessing them criticize each other for the very dynamic I'd benefited from. I had no idea, I admitted. Why would you? We didn't exactly keep in touch. She offered a small, sad smile. Anyway, about a year after you left, I dropped out of college. This genuinely shocked me. Sophia had always been academically average but socially successful. I'd assumed she'd thrive in the university environment. What happened? I was failing most of my classes. Without you there to help, I realized how much I'd come to depend on you academically. But it was more than that. I just didn't know who I was supposed to be anymore. All my life, I'd been defined in contrast to you, the outgoing twin, the social butterfly, the charming one. Without you there, that identity stopped making sense. How did Mom and Dad react? Sophia grimaced. Not well. It was the first time I'd truly disappointed them. They tried to be supportive, but I could see the disappointment, especially in Mom's eyes. Dad suggested I take a semester off to find myself, but one semester turned into 2, then a year. As she spoke, I felt a complex mix of vindication and empathy. There was a part of me, a small, wounded part, that was satisfied to hear that Sophia had struggled, that she hadn't continued to coast on the favoritism that had defined our childhood. But the larger part recognized the pain in my twin's eyes and understood that we had both been damaged by our parents' unequal treatment, just in different ways. What are you doing now? I asked. I work at an art supply store, she said, and I'm taking classes at the community college. Art therapy, actually. Turns out I love helping people express themselves through creativity. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I'm finding my own way just like you did. Not as impressively maybe, but it's authentic in a way my life never was before. Our coffee stretched into lunch, and I found myself sharing details of my own journey. The initial struggles, the friends who became family, my growing confidence in my academic path. For the first time since early childhood, Sophia and I were talking as equals, as individuals, rather than as the favored child and the overlooked one. Before we parted, Sophia hesitated, then pulled a small envelope from her purse. Mom asked me to give you this. No pressure to read it or respond. She just wanted you to have it. I took the envelope, not opening it right away. Thank you for meeting me, I said, surprising myself with my sincerity. It was good to talk. Maybe we could do it again sometime, she asked, hope evident in her voice. Maybe, I replied, not making a firm commitment, but not closing the door either. At home that evening, I finally opened my mother's envelope. Inside was a brief note asking if I would consider meeting them again, this time at a park near their house. Neutral ground, but less formal than the restaurant. She mentioned they had some things of mine they'd like to return if I wanted them. After several days of consideration, I texted my agreement. The following weekend found me sitting on a park bench watching my parents approach across the green space. My father carried a medium-sized box, my mother walking beside him with uncharacteristic uncertainty in her posture. Thank you for meeting us, my father said as they reached me. This is a beautiful spot. We exchanged pleasantries about the weather, about how well-maintained the park was, circling around the real purpose of our meeting. Finally, my father set the box on the bench beside me. We kept your room exactly as it was, he explained. We always hoped. He trailed off, not finishing the thought. Anyway, we thought you might want some of your things. My mother added, You don't have to take anything you don't want. We just thought you should have the option. I opened the box cautiously, unsure what I'd find. On top were some of my favorite books from high school, a few framed photos, the small collection of writing awards I'd accumulated over the years. Beneath those were more personal items, my childhood journal, a handmade quilt from a great aunt, a music box I'd loved as a child. But what caught my breath was at the very bottom of the box, a leather-bound recipe book in my grandmother's handwriting, and several envelopes of photos I'd never seen showing Grandma Jean as a young woman looking remarkably like me. Where did these come from? I asked, lifting the recipe book gently. Your grandmother left them specifically for you, my father said. After she passed, but before you left us. We should have given them to you right away. I felt tears prick my eyes, but blinked them back. Thank you for keeping them safe, I said formally. As I looked through the photos, my father cleared his throat. Adela, I want to help with your senior year expenses. It's the least I can do after everything. I looked up, studying his face. The offer was tempting, My scholarships and jobs covered my needs, but left little room for extras, and the publishing internship, while valuable for experience, paid barely above minimum wage. "Thank you," I said after a moment, "but I need to do this on my own. I've made it this far, and I need to finish what I started." He nodded, looking disappointed but not surprised. "I understand, but the offer stands if you ever change your mind." My mother, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "We've been talking about having regular family dinners," she said hesitantly. "Nothing formal, just a chance to try to be a family again. Once a month, perhaps. Would you consider joining us sometimes when your schedule allows?" I considered her request. My instinct was to refuse to protect the independence I'd fought so hard for. But Dr. Mason's words about reconciliation not being all or nothing came back to me. "I might be able to do that," I said carefully. "But I need to be clear about something. If we're going to try to build a relationship going forward, it has to be different from before. I won't go back to being invisible or taken for granted. I need to know that you see me, really see me, and value me for who I am, not who you think I should be." My parents exchanged glances. Then my father nodded. "That's fair. More than fair. And I won't pretend the past didn't happen." I continued, gaining confidence. "I'm willing to work toward forgiveness, but I won't forget or minimize what happened." "We wouldn't ask you to," my mother said softly. "We have a lot to make up for, and we know that." We parted with tentative plans for dinner the following month. As I watched them walk away, the box of my childhood treasures beside me, I felt a curious mixture of caution and possibility. I wasn't ready to fully trust them yet, but I was willing to leave the door ajar to see if they were truly capable of the change they claimed to want. As my graduation day approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. The cautious reconnection with my family had progressed in small, measured steps. The monthly dinners we'd agreed to started awkwardly, each of us hyper-aware of old patterns we were trying to break. There were missteps and tense moments, times when I had to point out when they were slipping back into treating Sophia and me differently. But there were also genuine efforts at change. My father began asking about my writing, not just polite questions, but thoughtful inquiries that showed he was actually reading the literary journals I'd been published in. "I never realized how much talent you have," he admitted one evening. "I wish I'd paid more attention sooner." My mother, always quick to offer opinions in the past, was learning to listen. She would catch herself when she started to dominate conversations or make decisions for everyone, pausing to ask what others thought. It was a small change, but a meaningful one. My relationship with Sophia evolved too. We weren't best friends, probably never would be, but we were building something new, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than competition. We began meeting for coffee every few weeks, just the two of us, gradually filling in the 3-year gap in our knowledge of each other's lives. "I always envied your strength," she confessed during one of our meetings. "The way you knew who you were and what you wanted even when Mom and Dad didn't see it." "I envied how easily you connected with people," I admitted in return. "How rooms would light up when you walked in." We were learning to see each other as whole people, not just as the roles we'd been assigned in childhood, the favorite and the overlooked. The most profound change, though, was within me. Through these cautious steps toward reconciliation, I discovered I no longer needed my parents' validation to feel complete. The desperate hunger for their approval that had defined my childhood was gone, replaced by a solid sense of self-worth built through my own achievements and the genuine connections I'd formed. I realized this most clearly during a particularly successful dinner at my parents' house, 6 months after our first restaurant meeting. My mother had prepared all my favorite foods, my father had asked insightful questions about my thesis project, and for once the conversation had flowed naturally without the underlying tension that usually accompanied our gatherings. As I drove home that night, I waited for the familiar warmth of finally having their attention, their approval, but instead I felt something different. A calm acknowledgement that while their recognition was nice, it was no longer necessary for my happiness. I had found my value without them, and that could never be taken away. My graduation ceremony fell on a perfect spring day, the kind of weather that seems designed for new beginnings. As I put on my cap and gown, I fastened my grandmother's locket around my neck, feeling her presence with me on this milestone day. I had achieved what I'd set out to do 4 years earlier, graduating with honors in literature, securing a full-time position at the publishing house where I'd interned, and most importantly, discovering who I was outside the shadow of my family's expectations. When I entered the auditorium, I scanned the crowd, not expecting to see my family despite having sent them invitations. We'd made progress, but our relationship remained fragile, and I'd prepared myself for their absence. To my surprise, I spotted them in the middle section. Not just my parents, but Sophia too. My mother clutched a bouquet of flowers, my father held a camera, and Sophia waved enthusiastically when she caught my eye. Beside them sat Jasmine, Professor Williams, and several friends from my literature program, my chosen family alongside my biological one. As I crossed the stage to receive my diploma, I heard cheers from both groups, and in that moment, the worlds I had kept carefully separated began to merge. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to suggest that perhaps I could have both: the independence I'd fought for, and a healthier version of the family connections I'd once thought lost forever. After the ceremony, amid the hugs and congratulations, my father pulled me aside. "I've never been more proud of anyone in my life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not because of the degree, though that's impressive, but because of who you've become despite our mistakes." My mother, for once, didn't try to dominate the conversation or make the moment about herself. Instead, she simply embraced me and whispered, "You did this on your own terms. That's a victory no one can take from you." Even Sophia's congratulations felt genuine, free from the competitive undertone that might once have colored it. "You've always been the strongest of us," she said, linking her arm through mine as we walked to the celebration lunch. "I'm just glad I get to see where that strength takes you next." Over the past year, I'd learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It means releasing the hold that pain has on your present and future. My parents had failed me for 18 years, and nothing could erase that reality. But I was choosing to allow them the opportunity to do better going forward while maintaining the boundaries that protected the independent life I'd built. I'd also learned that families come in many forms. The friends who had supported me when I had nothing, Jasmine offering her couch when I was homeless, Professor Williams seeing potential in my writing when I doubted myself, coworkers who became confidants. They were as much my family as the people who shared my DNA. As I look back now, I realize that running away at 18 was both an ending and a beginning. It was the end of trying to earn love that should have been freely given, the end of measuring my worth against Sophia's, the end of making myself smaller to fit into the role I'd been assigned. But it was also the beginning of discovering my own strength, of building relationships based on mutual respect, rather than obligation, of learning that I am enough exactly as I am. There are still difficult days. Family dinners sometimes resurrect old dynamics that we have to consciously correct. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. But there is progress. Genuine progress that I wouldn't have thought possible 3 years ago when I walked away with nothing but a backpack and determination. Perhaps the most valuable lesson I've learned is that sometimes you have to leave to find yourself, and sometimes you have to stand on your own before others can truly see you standing at all. In walking away, I found my voice. In building my own life, I created the strength to reconnect on my terms. Have you ever had to walk away from something to find yourself? How did you maintain your boundaries while allowing for healing? Share your experiences in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how others see you, but by how clearly you see yourself.